yes, just wanted to say a huge thank you to Dan for offering to lead the sofa session today. We really appreciate your insight and know that sharing experiences can be extremely valuable. And for that reason, just to let everyone know, we'll be recording this session so that it can be uploaded onto the hub afterwards, so that those who are unable to attend can also then hopefully benefit. So before we start, I thought it might just be useful to do some brief introductions, as there are only a couple of us. So maybe if we could start with Dan, would you be able to just tell us a bit about yourself, your background and your school?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. So my name's Dan Rosser. I am the principal here at Wooton Park. I was also the principal designate. I started here in January 16 and we opened in September 16. So I had 2 full terms in the lead up, which was helpful. In terms of my background, I've led on 2 free schools previously. So this was my 3rd new project, which was exciting. We're an all-through school, so we're 4 to 19. We currently have reception up to year 5 and year 7 up to year 12. Next year will be full, and we'll be just under 1,400 learners on site. So that's kind of our story so far. We had our Ofsted in July 19 that went very well, and we're very pleased with that. And now our main challenge is maintaining that and making sure that we keep the standards where they are. We were approved in wave 14 to open a 2nd free school, Wooton Park Hardingstone, and we're just working with local authority on numbers and need and land at the moment, and we aim to open that hopefully in September 25 or thereabouts, and then we will transition obviously from a SAT to a MAT. So that's kind of us and our story.
Thank you so much. Morning, Matthew. We're just going around and doing some brief introductions, but thank you so much for joining.
That's all right. Good morning. I'm Matthew Shotton. I'm the head teacher that's opening Glebe Farm in September and all through school in Milton Keynes. I'm currently an executive head teacher of 2 primary schools, one in Milton Keynes and one in Corby.
Thank you. And Paul, would you like to give a brief introduction?
Yeah, morning everybody. Paul Averis, I'm the principal designate of Boa Digital, a free school set to open in September 2022 as part of a small chain called Birmingham Ormiston Academy here in the city centre of Birmingham.
Perfect, thank you. So just to recap, this is a very informal session, so we'll be asking Dan some questions, but please jump in. This is meant to be a very informal discussion, so please direct it how you'd like. And Matthew, just wanted to make you aware that we will be recording this session. Morning, Emma.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. You joined just when we were doing some brief introductions. So I was wondering if you'd be able to just give us a brief introduction about yourself and your school.
Thank you. Yes, we'll do. So my name's Emma Vivian. I'm head teacher designate for Skye Primary and Eden Project Nursery, which is a school, free school, with up to 80% outdoor learning. And it will be built in West Carclays Garden Village, which is an eco village, which is being a regeneration development in the White China Clay area in Cornwall. So it's near St Austell. It's a very exciting project.
Perfect, thank you so much. So I think without further ado, we'll make a start, and if more people are joining, they can just trickle in. So I'll start off by asking Dan some questions, but please feel free to raise your hand. So firstly, I just wanted to ask, what are the first steps you take, Dan, when approaching a teacher recruitment process, and how do you identify skills gaps?
Yeah, perfect. I guess before I start, just I do recognise other colleagues on the call are experienced, so forgive me if I'm telling you how to suck eggs, as it were. But in terms of our journey and what we did, obviously our starting point was building that curriculum planning tool, looking at actually what is the curriculum that we're going to deliver, what is the curriculum that's right for our children, and that was really important. And that was both in the primary phase and the secondary phase. Very simple tool that we used to do that. That then gave us the amount of hours that we needed per subject and which classes and so on. And I think one of the key decisions we had to make quite early on was around which year groups we were going to open with. and that was quite a key question, because we were under some pressure to open both early years and year 1 and year 7 and year 8 at the same time. But actually that wasn't something we were keen on, because one, we wouldn't have been full, and also it would have had an impact on what we were doing in terms of teacher recruitment and the curriculum and so on. So we wanted to slow it down, start small and build it up. So that kind of was our approach to the curriculum as well. So in terms of those first steps of teacher recruitment, it was one, looking what was the curriculum need, once we knew who we were opening with and how we were going to open. It was then obviously fitting that into the budget, and making sure we could afford what we wanted, which we couldn't. So we then had to go back to the drawing board and say, actually, we can't afford a full-time with this, and so on. I think one of the key things that we did, what was looking at our leadership team, and how were we going to use our leadership team to deliver the curriculum. And that was really important, because actually what we didn't do was appoint a curriculum leader of maths and an AP. I was able to get an assistant principal who could deliver on the maths. And I did that both in maths and English and science. Quite an expensive model, and it was an expensive way to do it, but it meant that we got really, really experienced staff building that curriculum from scratch. So I think for us that was the right approach. It also meant with that teacher recruitment that we could recruit some really, really strong staff, because we were putting it on an SLT salary. So in that first year, we didn't take any NQTs or ECTs as they are now. We just went for slightly less staff, but more experienced staff, so that we could build a quality curriculum, but also reputation as well. And that was really important. So those were some of our first steps. We also, and our challenge, like I'm sure some of you will have, was around getting signing off on the funding agreement. So one of our challenges was making sure we kept those staff warm, because clearly they were in current jobs. And until we had the funding agreement, we couldn't issue the contracts. So it was really late in the day when we were, issuing contracts. And actually, we had to get our staff to resign from their current roles before we'd issued a contract to them at the May half term. So that was a bit of a risk for them. But fortunately, it worked. So those were the first steps that we had to overcome, I think, before we opened in terms of teacher recruitment. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was really helpful. Thank you. So my next question, unless anyone else wants to jump in, is what networks and outlets do you use to identify these strong candidates? Yeah,
so we were signed up to TESS, first of all. So we used their portal. One of the things that we found out quite early, you can buy a package, so you can do unlimited adverts for X amount per year. Whereas I know previously it was expensive because you were paying £2,000 an advert and so on. So buying the package, I think for us, about 6.5K meant that we have unlimited adverts, and that was good for us, because for some of our jobs we had to go out a couple of times because we didn't find candidates that were strong enough to fill those posts. Going back to who we appointed in the first wave, by appointing those senior leaders, we were fortunate. Within Northamptonshire, we've got a couple of outstanding schools that have good reputations, and we were able to pick our senior leaders out of those schools. So we also played on reputation of where we were taking staff from, and that was really helpful, because they then had their own network of colleagues that they'd worked with previously. So we almost went on the back of the outstanding of the other schools where we were taking our staff from. And then when we did events and so on, we made sure those staff were very visible, and we made sure that we mentioned where they'd come from. And that gave parents comfort that actually we had experienced staff who knew what outstanding looked like, because that's what we were selling to the parents. And then it was word of mouth and so on, as happens in the teaching profession. One colleague knows somebody else, and someone's brother was interested in this and so on, and word spread. I think the other thing that we did in terms of network about strong candidates, we did lots and lots of meet and greets, lots of open events. I remember spending many a night in the local leisure centre, cafe and so on, meeting potential candidates who wanted to come and have a chat, because clearly we didn't have a school at that point. So being accessible, I think, was really key. And I think that once people started to meet the leadership team, they really started to buy into the vision, particularly the parents, but also staff as well. But once, you know, it's not just a job description on the page. I think with a new school, it's certainly about selling that vision and almost building that dream for colleagues to come and start something from scratch, which is quite a unique opportunity. So yeah, so those were our networks. We're now in a more fortunate position. We continue with tests. We now get colleagues approaching us, which is quite nice. We get quite a lot of speculative CVs and, you know, I've heard what work you're doing, or my friend's working with you, or my friend's children attend your school. I appreciate you haven't got any vacancies at the moment, but if you could bear me in mind, etc. And in the current climate, that's, you know, quite a nice position to be in for some of those posts as well. So yeah, so those are the networks that we use, but it's always growing, it's always evolving, but word of mouth and reputation, really key.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a mixture of personal and organisational connections and advertising these externally, I suppose. And you mentioned the school's kind of vision and identity and how that plays a role in the recruitment process. I was wondering if you could just expand a bit on that and how you've incorporated the school's ethos and values into the recruitment process.
Yeah, okay. So for us, I think we're always very open and honest about who we are and what we are and what we're not. And I think that was really important from day one, because I think coming into a free school is a very different environment to an established school. I think it's hard work, like all teaching is, but I think it's particularly hard work because you haven't got 50 years of whatever schemes of learning, etc., sat on the shelf. You're doing it all from scratch. So I think for us, it's about being clear who we are, clear what our vision is, clear what our expectations are, and being open and honest with staff and saying, yes, it is hard work. It's not for the faint-hearted. It is for people that want to take a risk, because, you know, that there is that innovation and creativity element to it. And then obviously in all of the material that we were sending out to candidates and so on, was really important that we get that message across so they knew exactly what they were getting involved in and what they were buying into. So we spent a fair bit of our pre-opening money on marketing and branding, and that was really important. So we had a very strong identity in which to share that vision and so on. In terms of how did the vision and how did we use it to recruit the right candidates, a lot of that was through time and meetings and conversations, them meeting me, them meeting my leadership team, and deciding actually whether they, one, wanted to go on the journey, but also, you know, did they want to buy into the vision that we were sharing with them as well, and that was key. We've got a very good staff recruitment and retention currently, so maybe 2 or 3 staff we lose a year. So many of the staff that started with us in year 1 are still with us, and I think that's because we appointed like-minded people who understood the vision, who understood the school. They agreed with the moral purpose and the direction in which we were going, and that was quite refreshing as well, I think, as a school leader, to be able to do that, because you're working with colleagues who are on the same page, who are excitable, you know, who really are innovators and creative, and the people that get Wooton Park, and that's important to us. So yeah, so that's how we made sure our vision came through in those early conversations, and how we've continued to do that.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I just wanted to ask a bit more about how you kind of communicate that identity and brand, I guess, as a newly established SAT and community group in pre-opening, and as the school grew. Could you just tell us how you kind of communicated that with staff or potential candidates? Yeah,
so as I say, I think from day one we were very clear on our non-negotiables. This is who we are, this is what we do, these are our standards, these are our expectations, so people knew exactly what they were coming into. We found that with colleagues who were hearing that, who perhaps were a little bit disillusioned in the current education system, with perhaps behaviour and attendance and Ofsted and all of those things, found it quite refreshing coming into an environment that was new and innovative, and you'd have the green light to try new things and so on. So communicating that through word of mouth, through visits, through the literature was really important. Very early on, we engaged with a marketing company who are absolutely superb, and we work with Kinetic, who I know have worked on a number of free schools. That's what they specialise in. I know they're working with us on our second school. I know they work with Michaela, Rugby Free School, and so on. And having their expertise and guidance was really, really critical. They were able to tell us things that do work and don't work, things that are effective in hitting our target audience, and so on. We still work with them to a lesser extent now, but they were really crucial in helping us to build our brand and to develop. For us in the early days, it was then a lot about social media. Whilst I know social media can be the bane of all of our lives in education, with the young people, in terms of recruitment was really, really key. So we paid for some Facebook posts. We're recruiting, those sorts of things, and that really, really paid off. In addition to obviously tests and so on, we use Twitter, more so now that we're employing staff who aren't quite as old as me, who understand it a bit better. So again, using social media has had a really good effect on spreading the word, spreading the branding. We do like things with our logo on, as you can see behind me. So lots of pop-up banners. We had pens galore flying around with our logos on and so on. And those little things that made us seem real. Because I think one of the things we wanted to do was to say, actually, we are real, we are opening. We are going to be an outstanding school. We are going to have really high standards. And what we wanted to do was create a brand and a literature that spoke that message. So everything we produced was high quality. It wasn't just things photocopied on a piece of paper or whatever. We thought about the colours, and we thought about the branding. We thought about what we had, you know, the mugs and the pens and the glossy flyers and all of those things. So as I say, we did spend a fair chunk on that marketing, but I think it really paid off, because it made us look like we meant business. It made us look like we knew what we were doing. And there were lots of schools, there were a few schools locally that were putting out a message saying, you know, they're not new, they're untested, they've got no exam results, they've got no Ofsted. I wouldn't be trusting them with my child. So it was really important that we were able to present a very coherent and an established brand. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we did.
Thank you. Yeah, I always find it so inspiring to hear about heads recruiting for a school that doesn't exist, and all the creative ways you go down to navigate that. It is fascinating. I just wanted to take a quick pause to ask if anyone had any kind of comments or reflections or any questions. I don't want to be sort of firing through questions without leaving space to jump in. So please feel free to jump in if you have any questions.
Can I ask a question, Rhian? Is that all right? Hi, Dan.
Hi, Matt.
Just a quick one for me. If you were offering advice in the, you know, what didn't work well, or what not to do, would you have any nuggets that we could take on board from that point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of staff recruitment, I think we tried to offer too much too early, and we got caught out. So, prime example, technology. We thought it'd be great to have all of the curriculum all at once from day one. We couldn't recruit a technology teacher, so we actually worked with a local outstanding school, and we brought in a technology teacher for 1 day a week. And because we're a SAT, we were quite fortunate that I'd had that relationship with a head teacher from a previous trust, who just happened to get a headship down the road, so we could buy that in. But it didn't really work for us because, for whatever reason, that colleague wasn't bought into the school, it wasn't bought into the vision. So we found that our standards that we were expecting in year one weren't being upheld. So actually we made the decision to take technology off the curriculum for 2 years, until we could afford an experienced, outstanding member of staff who was our own member of staff. So I guess that's something I've learned is, you know, I guess you can't do everything on day one. And it's probably only now in year 6 that we're starting to do some of the really nice bits that we've been wanting to do for the past few years. But we were very clear, and as a leadership team, we remind ourselves we'll only do things that are outstanding, and we're not willing to do something just for the sake of doing it or to tick a box. Anything we do, we want it to be the best. So technology is an example. We did the same with music. We did music. We had a temporary build for the first 4 years, and in year one we had music, and again we brought in a music teacher for a day a week, but because it was a temporary build, every time somebody hit the drum you heard it in every room. So again we abandoned music for 2 years, and then we brought it back in when we were able to have the right facilities and offer an outstanding music curriculum, rather than the half-baked effort that the children didn't really engage with because the quality of provision wasn't great, the resource wasn't great, we didn't have the facilities. So yeah, so I guess one bit of advice, or in hindsight, is you can't be everything to everyone from day one, and it's about deciding what's really core to your vision and to your values, and what is it the learners want as well, because actually what we're doing here will probably look different to what we do in our next school, because we'll have a different intake and it's in a slightly different demographic. So yeah, keeping learners at the centre of all we do, I think, is really important as well.
Thank you, Dan.
I've just seen a question that Emma's put into the chat. She's just asked, did you visit shortlisted candidates in their own settings too? In
terms of teachers? Yeah, no, we were fortunate because part of our interview process, and it will be the same in your schools, I'm sure, first thing we do is get them to teach, and we're quite brutal at that point. If they haven't delivered outstanding, then we send them away, and they don't go through the rest of the process. We've taken a little bit of criticism on that, but actually our approach is, if you want outstanding in the classroom, why would you lower your standard in that? So we worked again with a local school who kindly lent us some children, and we actually held the interviews in their school, and that worked really well, actually. So we were able to have our primary interviews with primary children and secondary and so on. We had to be flexible on the timings and work around their curriculum, etc., and their timetable. But building up those relationships with local schools was really, really important for us. It took a while, and not all of them wanted to play with us because they were worried that we're going to take their children off them. But going back to that thing, that was again part of the driver with only opening with reception in year 7, is that we were less of a threat to the local established schools. So we weren't suddenly going to be taking bums off seats in year 8 and year 1. So that was another driver behind that decision.
Thank you so much. Unless anyone else has any other questions, I had a question around, as your school grows, did you face any issues around attracting secondary staff without being able to offer them GCSE and A-level teaching immediately?
Yeah, no, that wasn't a challenge for us, interestingly enough. We thought it might be, but again, I think it goes back to how you say your vision and values, and I think the fact that staff were joining an ambitious school that wanted to be outstanding and wanted to do well, that was a heavier pull than being able to offer GCSE and A-level in the first couple of years. Now the staff we appointed are very experienced at GCSE and A-level, and part of our job was to make sure we kept them skilled. So we did have to send them on regular courses and so on, just so they didn't get out of touch of what the Key Stage 5 curriculum looked like. So that was a consideration that we had about 2 years ago that actually we hadn't thought of until a curriculum leader came in for science and said, actually, I'm preparing the year 12 scheme of learning, I'm a little bit out of touch, can I go? And well, of course, and off they went on their training, they went to visit other schools and so on. But no, it wasn't an issue for us because they'd bought into the vision and they were excited about building from scratch. And I think that outweighed the loss of teaching Key Stage 5.
Sure, thank you. It's definitely a very unique role starting in a brand new school. So you've spoken about how you got around not being able to recruit for specific subjects and things like that. I was wondering if there was a time where you've had to adapt your staffing structure because recruitment didn't go to plan.
Yeah, so I mean, again, we were very clear in what we were looking for. And one, we wanted people that are outstanding in the classroom, but also it was really important that we had people that understood us and our vision, and that they bought into Wooton Park. Very early on, when we opened in year one, the learners came up with this idea about something called the Wooton Park Way. And they started talking about this thing called the Wooton Park Way. So we got them to write it down. It was just 5 very clear things that they want from their teachers and they want from their school. So it's things like respect each other, to walk around with a smile on your face, to help each other, very simple things, but that actually then fed into our recruitment process as well. And even now we use the learners as part of the recruitment process. We've just appointed 13 new staff for September that we've just finished last week, because we've got that last year of growth, and the learners still, you know, on their comments and their feedback back to SLT, still talk about whether they think that member of staff would have the Wooton Park Way, which is quite nice. Remind me of your question, Rianne, because that probably didn't answer it, did it? I got all excited.
Well, I mean, feel free to talk about anything really, but I was just asking about if you've had to adapt staffing structures, or also if there are just any other examples where you've had to take an innovative approach to recruitment. Yeah,
okay, so there were times when we didn't recruit. So for example, I've given the example of technology and music, where we had to buy it in from another school. There were times that we went out to advert 2 or 3 times because we found good candidates but not outstanding candidates, and actually what we weren't prepared to do was to lower the bar. So again, we had to be quite innovative and creative in what we were doing, and we did tweak the curriculum a little bit, particularly around drama, expressive arts. We couldn't appoint an outstanding drama teacher first time round, so we actually flexed our curriculum and did a little bit more creative arts rather than drama for a year, because again, we weren't willing to compromise on the quality of education. And I think, you know, that there's lots and lots of fantastic teachers out there, but trying to get them in can be a challenge. So for us, that was something that we wouldn't compromise on, what was the quality, because actually if you're trying to build outstanding, which is what we all aspire to be, then the children deserve the best. And I've stood up in front of parents before we even had the school, and I said, if you choose us, you will be sending your child to the best school in the county. And that's quite a big promise to have made. There were times when I thought, I wish I hadn't have said that, but I did. And we've been able to deliver that, and I think that's really important. So yeah, we had to go out a few times, but we've got there in the end. And as I say, we're now in a nice position where colleagues approach us for posts and so on, which is good. I think the other thing that we've been a little bit perhaps different and so on is with our appointments. And sometimes you've got to take a bit of a gamble and a bit of a risk. So last month, when we were interviewing for and advertising for maths, we had three candidates, very strong candidates. I only needed 2, but with a little bit of a jiggle with the budget, I've taken on all 3 for September. Now, last week, I've got one of my maths teachers who's decided to have a break from teaching. So actually that gamble's paid off. And I think being brave in those appointments has been something that we've done and has really helped us actually. Same happened in English a couple of years ago. So I think being a bit of a risk taker, I think setting up a new free school, I think is really important, as long as it's a calculated risk and it's not going to lead to financial issues. But sometimes an opportunity comes along. I think you've got to take it. About 6 months ago, we had a maths teacher who was a friend of a friend, had been in the charity sector, wanted to come back into teaching and didn't have a post. We created that post for her, and she's now, you know, one of our strongest maths teachers. So it's about seeing those opportunities and taking those opportunities, I think. And that's where you need to be flexible and I think innovative in your staffing.
That's great, thank you.
I've got a question, Rianne.
Go for it.
Hi, Dan, you all right?
Oh, yeah.
Dan, education brief. So coming up to March 31st, I've got to submit my education brief ready for the various steps and levels that will subsequently follow. I'd like to put in place for that education brief. How much did that change, or was there a need for, or was there a level of checking in on that by various bodies in, say, the 12-24 months after you opened?
Yeah, great question, Paul. And you know, as part of preparing for today, we went back and we looked at our education brief and that original vision and so on. And I would say after 12 months, what we were doing looked nothing like our education brief, is a truthful answer. For us, that looking in hindsight, that was about going through a process. And actually, when you actually open, clearly things change and things develop. You know, you're writing that education brief really for children that you don't know who you're going to be getting, and for staff you don't know who you're going to have. So there has to be flex in that. We had our education advisor from DFE who came and visited us. I think it was in the second or third term and the sixth term. And he was fine with that. And we explained why we'd made those changes. And he said, that's fine. I think you've made the right decision. So nobody really checked. Nobody really held us to account. I think if our education advisor had come in and things hadn't gone well, or he noticed that things weren't quite where they wanted to be, he probably would have drawn us back more to the education brief. But I think from our position, it was probably more of a process to go through to make sure we had things in place rather than being held account to what we'd written. Yeah. So I think it's a bit of a tick box.
Can I ask another question? Is that all right, Rhian? Can I come to the role of Senko? So I've been in the world of education for a number of years, as we all have here, and we all know that it's perhaps one of the toughest roles to recruit to. Can I ask, in your early years, did you combine it with a role, or did you attract an existing Senko, or did you look for a colleague with the kind of appetite to undertake the training and mould your own?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Paul. So we did appoint a Senko. We went out to advert. We decided that we were going to go for a part-time Senko to start with. However, when the children started to apply, we noticed there was a high SEND need, because we were seen as a small school. So a lot of the, in Northamptonshire, we've got quite a few small primaries of 100, 200, and the secondaries are 1,500, 1,800, 2,000. So a lot of the parents didn't want their child, who'd been in a very small primary school, going to a very large school. So we found out quite early on that we were attracting quite a high number of learners with SEND. And in our year one, we were actually 25% SEND. So that kind of changed our thinking a little bit on the Senko. So we went out to advert and we actually changed it to a full-time post based on that. And again, we freed up some money. I think we agreed that we were going to do without something, so that we could have a full-time Senko. The Senko we appointed was very good. However, because we didn't get our funding agreement in time, she wasn't prepared to resign from her post without having a contract, which I understand. So what I was able to do was contact an ex-colleague in one of the schools where I'd been on the leadership team, who just happened to have moved to Northampton, and we were able to persuade her to come over to join us. And it's absolutely amazing, you know, 15 years of being a Senko, and is the best Senko I've ever worked with. So we were quite fortunate in that way. But yeah, we had to change. What we're now doing is we've now put in place 2 deputy Senkos, one with primary experience, qualified teacher, one with a secondary teaching experience, who we're now training up with a view that when we get the second school, we'll then have a SEND team that can run over the 2 schools. And then I've also got one of our very gifted maths teachers who's very passionate about SEND, and she's actually doing the SEND qualification as well. So the plan would be is that we could then take one of those colleagues, place them in the new school, and we've got that succession planning going on. Yeah, we had to, I think it's fair to say, we had to pay quite a lot for our Senko, but it's probably some of the best money that we spent.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay.
We've got a bit of time, so I just want to invite anyone else to ask some questions or any reflections or comments if anything that Dan has mentioned has resonated with your experience, or if there are any challenges you're facing at the moment, please feel free to jump in.
I suppose all I'm going to say, Dan, is as a head that's been doing a lot of research around opening an all-through school, you talked about your branding, and I just want to say that it absolutely smacks you in the face that, you know, from the research that I've been doing, Wooton Park branding, it looks really, really strong, and it's something that we as a team have been looking at your branding and what you're putting in place as something to aspire to. So I just wanted to say that even though you didn't know you were doing it, you've been a real support to us growing this school, and I'd welcome the opportunity to meet with you in person so that we can have further conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that feedback, Matt. I think, yeah, it's nice to hear that. Sometimes you do things, don't you, in education, we're not overly good at offering that praise or feedback. So thank you, I appreciate that. And we're more than happy to have you come over. You're only Milton Keynes. So I think you've got your colleagues been trying to arrange a date, I think. So yeah, more than happy. I guess one of the other things to throw in as an all-through school, we've worked really, really hard to be a single school. And I think with an all-through school, it's very easy to have a primary and a secondary that run separately. And as part of our recruitment, we always made sure that we had staff that would work across both phases. So, for example, all of our children from reception up learn Spanish, and we use our secondary Spanish staff to deliver that. Same for PE. PE is delivered by our secondary specialists. In year 4, they then go and have science in a science lab taught by one of our science teachers. And that's the real power, I think, of an all-through school. Whereas I know that some other all-throughs perhaps are run more as 2 separate entities. But I think you're missing out on such a trick if you do that. And also with the design of our building, the original architect's plan was for 2 buildings, one for primary, one for secondary, but we insisted on a single building so that the children did interact and they did, you know, bump into each other in the corridors, have conversations, coach each other, etc. Because we wanted that community, but we also wanted to get rid of that year 6 into 7 shift. And actually for us, when the children come up from year 6 to year 7, they're just going up another year group. So we shouldn't have that dip because it's just normal for them. So we've worked really hard on being one school, and that's, we've had to really re-educate some staff, you know, on secondary background. So my first couple of months of going in and getting covered in yogurt and glitter, complete culture shock for me. Little ones clinging off your leg, nightmare. But now we embrace it, and you know, it really brightens up my day when I pop down and they're all waving at me and so on. That's the little ones, not the older ones. They do wave, but not quite enthusiastically. So yeah, so I think building that culture of one school, and we've actually taken the tagline of one school, one journey, and that was talking about marketing. Those little lines were quite important for parents, and that made sure we were full in primary, because you know they see it as, I don't have that big chore of where's my child going to go for secondary. Well, actually, once they're with us, they're with us. So one school, one journey. So it takes away all of that, you know, pain and anguish if they don't get their chosen secondary school as well. So I guess that's another way that we've used marketing. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful advice. Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to pick up on the point that you made about mentioned that you recruited some senior leaders from local schools within the area. But just a sort of broader point about your relationship with those schools that we sort of touched upon. How did you, what was your approach over time? I know you've mentioned it's taken quite a while to develop that, but what sort of would be the best advice to people on the call for approaching those conversations and developing those relationships?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the first bit of advice is don't take it personally when they won't talk to you. And we had a lot of that. I remember going to our first cluster meeting with the local primary, and Wooton Park was number 4 on the agenda. about whether they were going to let us join the group or not. So that was quite interesting. It took us a year to get an invite because we were seen as a threat. And I understand that. I think it shifted over time when we proved that we were credible, when we proved that actually we were here for the duration. When we opened back in September 16, there was still a lot of speculation about free schools, and I think some of the early free schools set up by parents and so on didn't get the best press. So it was really important, and again, I guess that ties in with the branding to show that we are credible, we are here. And then it was just time. You know, I made a point about going and visiting the schools. We still do it actually. So all of our feeder schools, year 6 into year 7, we go and visit the schools. And again, that helps to build up reputation, but it also helps to build up those relationships. We invited all the local heads in to have a look round. We did the same for middle leaders and so on. And again, because we recruited relatively locally, people knew people and they said, oh, my friend works there, can they just pop in and have a look? So we've had a lot of people in through the door looking at what we're doing. And I think that has built up over time. Yeah, and we've now got a very good relationship with local head teachers on the whole. We've still got a couple that don't want to engage with us, and that's fine. But actually for us, it's about focusing on our learners. We'll always do what's best for them. We don't lose sleep or waste time on local politics. Life's too short, and our learners deserve best, really. They deserve better than us to be arguing with local heads. So if they want to play, they want to play. If they don't, they don't, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Rian, I think we can wrap up if there are no more questions.
Sure. Yeah, unless anyone else wants to jump in to share their experience or any questions or comments. I guess my final question is just, Dan, based on your reflections, do you have any final concluding top tips and learnings from the challenges that you encountered?
I guess, do I regret doing it? There have been times, but absolutely, it's the best role that I've had, which I think is fantastic. For me, it's the excitement of being able to start with a completely blank slate, build your own team. I think is a unique experience for a head teacher, because normally you inherit, but actually being able to build a team of like-minded colleagues is really important. I guess a bit of advice would be, don't compromise on your non-negotiables. And I think that's really, really key, because there will be pressures too, particularly around budget and quality of teaching and so on. And as I've hopefully explained, that's one thing that we've not been willing to do. And if that means we change our curriculum, or if it means we change how we do things or the structure of what we're doing, then for me, that's the right thing to do, rather than compromise on those non-negotiables, which for us was about quality. It was about everybody being able to attain, and it was about community and building that stronger society. So those were the 3 core things that we said we're not going to move away from. And we've had to shift and flex and change, and things look different to our education brief and that pre-opening Ofsted and all of those things, because that's the right thing to do, and that's what our children that we serve in our community need and deserve. Really, they deserve the best, and we're not going to compromise on that. The other thing I guess that I would leave you with is don't be afraid to innovate. And again, as a brand new SAP, we didn't have a history of, but we've always done it like this, and that was quite refreshing. I think leading a school from the start is a unique opportunity, and I think particularly if you're part of a MAT, there'll be influences about, you need to do it like this, you need to do it like that. And I guess as a leader, it's about pushing back on that a little bit and saying, actually, we've got a unique opportunity. This is how we're going to do it. And okay, some things we tried don't work. Well, that's okay. It's we don't get it right first time, and we'll change it, and we'll come back and make it even better next time. So yeah, don't be afraid to innovate and push the boundaries and try new things, because I think that's part of the enjoyment of leading a new free school. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to ask if anyone has any final questions or comments before we wrap up.
Really helpful. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Dan. Thank you.
All welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for your time. I know how useful it is to share experiences, and there are so many common challenges. So I think this has been really valuable. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining and for your questions. I think this has been a really helpful discussion. So I really hope you gained value from it. And I just wanted to give a reminder that the NSN Hub is an open space for discussing any challenges you might be facing, and it's really useful for other heads to see. So please feel free to post any kind of challenges you're facing, or if you want to start a discussion on the Hub, please feel free to do so. And I also wanted to just flag some upcoming principal designate events that might be of interest to a couple of you. We've got one on the 22nd of February about Ofsted pre-registration and readiness to open meeting, one on the 1st of March about building an effective team, and one on the 8th of March about the first 100 days of the new headship. So you can register for those on our website. And other than that, all that's left to say is please contact us if you're having any issues at all. And yeah, the Hub is there for that as well. Other than that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Perfect. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, really good.